We're so grateful that you are here with us, with the Interfaith Council of Rossmore and the Interfaith Council of Contra Costa County. Together, we're presenting today's Rossmore's Interfaith Council's big question: what is the purpose of life? And we're happy that Dave Longhurst serves on the governing board of the Interfaith Council of Contra Costa County and is today's presenter. Sarah, take it away.
Okay, so once again, welcome to you adventurers and explorers of this year's big question. What is the purpose of life? And as Will said, we are privileged today to have David Longhurst representing the perspective of the Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints.
There's another layer above what you can see.
No.
Everybody should be muted. Thank you to Susie Cole, President of the Interfaith Council, and to the Big Questions Committee, Channing Miller, Gloria Sunshine, Ruth Ahern. We much appreciate Will McGarvey. Thank you so much, Will, for shepherding us through the pandemic on Zoom and for continuing to do so. Also, thank you to Channel 28 for recording this session.
I don't know.
I would also like to welcome Robert Esch, who is from the great state of Washington, way up there by Port Angeles. He and his wife are very involved in interfaith activities up there. So good to see you. So many of you. It's just wonderful to take a moment and look around and see who's here. So we are each on a journey, exploring in our own ways this question of the purpose of life, the meaning of life. It seems that this purpose can change from time to time, depending on the personal situation of our individual life experience. But we also have to formulate our own big picture.
Should keep me.
We have to formulate our own big picture of the purpose of life. My individual purpose of life has changed.
Does that operate with the sound control?
Well, maybe that's the problem.
Whoever's at Mary Smith, will you
It's
please
all
mute
going over
yourselves?
there.
We're in the midst of the presentation and you're barging into the presentation. Please listen and we'll be able to return to the presentation.
Oh, good. Thank you. Yes. So my individual purpose of life, as I was saying, has changed for the present anyway, with the breaking of my wrist. I was walking a big dog and it ran and I held on and was pulled down in a nasty fall. However, this incident gave me a metaphor for my introduction to Mr. Longhurst today. The Japanese have an art and a philosophy called kintsugi. Kintsugi. Kintsugi means golden joining. Kintsugi is the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery by mending the areas of breakage with lacquer dusted or mixed with gold or silver. So the cracks in the breaks, the cracks or the breakage is illuminated. It's a wonderful idea. I've never personally seen any kintsugi pottery. I've seen pictures of it, and you have the whole pot and you've got this beautiful line of gold or silver mending each piece of the pottery that broke. As a philosophy, kintsugi, and David, you could pass this on to your daughter. As a philosophy, this kintsugi is such a process that can apply to the art of living. We all have broken places, and meaning can be found through the healing process. In the philosophy of kintsugi, the break is illuminated and becomes a vital part of the whole. Our attitudes can become like the gold or silver lacquer, illuminating our experience of healing in the art of living. Now, I must say, I am still working strongly on this illumination. I'm still in the complaining stage, but I do hope to move up to the higher stage of feeling that the break I got with my wrist can be illuminated. It really does seem how we deal with our experiences of brokenness and their healing is fundamentally related to our bigger picture of the purpose of life. And now, addressing the big question, what is the purpose of life? I would like to introduce our speaker, David Longhurst, who will present the perspective of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. David Longhurst grew up in a family farm in Southeast Washington. As a young man, he served a mission in Sao Paulo, Brazil, for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, experiencing the joy of service and the power of the gospel to transform lives. He subsequently attended Brigham Young University, where he obtained a BS in accounting. He married Chris Thrapp while at school, and they subsequently have learned much in raising seven wonderfully diverse children. In his career, David has enjoyed working at Ernst & Young and Safeco Mutual Funds in Seattle and Dodge & Cox in San Francisco. He recently retired from his role as treasurer of the Dodge & Cox funds, excited to devote more time for his many other passions, including community service, gardening, and spending time with his grandchildren. David has served in several lay assignments in his church, including bishop, counselor in a stake presidency, and scoutmaster. He currently serves as a member of the Danville Stake High Council. He also represents his church, as Will said, on the Interfaith Council of Contra Costa County. You certainly are finding some wonderful, valuable things, David, to do with your retired time. Sounds like you're pretty busy. So I would like now to introduce David Longhurst.
Sarah, thank you so much for that thoughtful and generous introduction. That was really nice. And I would say that one of my passions beyond gardening and family and community service is interfaith. It's been a kind of a newer passion, but I'm really loving interfaith involvement, dialogue. I found that interfaith dialogue helps me to be self-reflective. I can sort of look at how my tradition is different from others and look at the other and take away the strengths from it and see how mine might have some strengths as well to offer. I love what Krister Stendhal said about interfaith dialogue. He had 3 rules for interfaith dialogue, and they were, number 1, let the other define herself. Don't think you know the other without listening. Number 2, compare equal to equal, not my positive qualities to your negative ones. And number 3, find beauty in the other so as to develop holy envy. I love this idea of holy envy when we can look at each other's faith and find the good in it and just be delighted to see that in another faith. I've really loved hearing other perspectives on this big question this year. I really resonated with the presentation last month by Reverend Dan Sturdivant. I think that the idea of being open to awe and wonder is just a beautiful thing. As Sarah mentioned, I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We're often referred to as Mormons. It's a nickname that we gained early in the history of the church, which started in the early 1800s. It's a nickname that came because of a book of scripture that we use that is entitled the Book of Mormon. The Book of Mormon happens to be named after the primary editor of the book, a prophet in ancient America. But the formal name of the church is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And we prefer that you use that name, even though it's a bit of a mouthful. I thought I would share also, and Will, if you can go to my personal background slide, I thought I would just share a little about my personal background. As Sarah shared some of it, I might just add a little bit to that. As she noted, I grew up on a family farm in Washington State. My parents were committed members. Indeed, the ancestry on most of my family lines joined the church back in the mid 1800s, and they crossed the plains to Utah, from the Midwest to Utah, with other Latter-day Saints after they were driven out from Illinois. And they were driven out from Illinois soon after the first prophet and president of the church, Joseph Smith, was martyred. So I really have a wonderful heritage in the church. Nonetheless, in my early years, religion was not my thing. I tolerated it. Sitting still for an hour and a half each week in church meeting was the last thing I wanted to do if I had my way. But in my late teenage years, I began to see how what I was learning in the church really had practical value. Following teachings of Jesus really helped people to live a good life. And I had a few experiences where I felt deep love, or what we in the church call the Spirit, that I attributed to God. So I decided to serve a full-time mission for our church. It's a rite of passage for many young men and young women in our faith. I was called to serve in Sao Paulo, as Sarah mentioned, and had just a marvelous experience. I discovered there the joy of losing yourself in the service of others, and I connected deeply with a number of people there that I still dearly love to this day. During this 2-year period of religious immersion, I found myself expand in unique and powerful ways. That propelled me to dedicate my life to striving to live the gospel as taught by Jesus ever more fully. I attended BYU, where I married my wife, Chris. I got an accounting degree. Then I worked in public accounting for several years before I joined Mutual Fund Family in Seattle. Then 17 years ago, I accepted a job at Dodge & Cox, where I again retired from that at the end of the year. Really delighted to be in this position in life. It's been a busy life thus far, raising a big family, as well as just working hard in a lot of areas. So I'm just delighted to have a little more time for reflection. As Sarah mentioned, Chris and I have 7 wonderfully diverse children, and I would accentuate or emphasize the word diverse. They really challenge us and push us in good ways. And I have 12 perfect grandchildren. I serve on both the Interfaith Council of Contra Costa County and the Interfaith Council of Alameda County, representing our church. I'm also on the advisory board of the United Way of the Bay Area. And I'm also a board member and president of the Bay Area Mormon Studies Council. It's a young organization, and we're looking to establish an endowed professorship at the Graduate Theological Union, or GTU, in Berkeley. That will allow us to participate in interfaith dialogue in an academic setting. And GTU is a multi-faith theology school, one of the largest in the world, really. So over the years, I've served in many lay leadership positions in the church, and in our faith, all the local roles, including the leadership roles, are filled by lay leaders. None of us have been to theology school, and I feel a little bit inadequate, as many of the others who have spoken have theology degrees and might speak regularly in church settings. I speak occasionally in church settings, but this is a unique opportunity for me today. But back to the roles I've had in the church, I've really, really enjoyed them. Serving has helped me to grow in a number of ways. But in recent years, the last couple or 3 years, I felt a real urge to deepen my connection to God. Sometimes we get so busy in our faith, doing all the things that we need to do to run a local church unit, that sometimes we're not quite as we don't connect as much to God. Although our church leaders are really encouraging us to really deeply connect. Last year, I began a daily practice of meditation. I found that to be just really a wonderful practice. I also enrolled in the two-year living school. It's a school conducted by the author and speaker Richard Rohr and the nonprofit that he founded, the Center for Action and Contemplation, and really loving my participation in that. So next, I'd like to just turn, and I've talked a little bit about myself, I'd like to turn to the Latter-day Saint theology, or the theology of our church. And Will, if you looks like you've already made the page turn, thank you. I would like to just frame how our church thinks about the purpose of life. And then I would like to add some comments at the end. So in terms of theology, we think of God as the supreme intelligence in the universe. In addition to God the Father, we believe that he is partnered with a feminine deity, our mother in heaven. We believe that the gods, the God the Father and God the Mother, are distinct persons, and that they are embodied in a celestial body. Our spirits, we lived in life before this, we lived with God before this life, and our spirits are coexistent from God, and they're eternal. Under God's tutelage over the years, we acquired knowledge and character traits that we bring into this earthly life. God loves us and wants us to be like them. Each of us is a beloved son and daughter of God, or daughter of God. We have a divine heritage and a divine nature. Each of us has a piece of divinity inside us. Because God loves us and wants us to progress, they organize this earth from pre-existing elements. Earth is an opportunity to exercise our agency. The principle of agency is a bedrock value in our faith. A veil of forgetfulness shrouds our premortal life, so that our choices here in this life may be more freely rendered. Still, each person is endowed with the light of Christ, or a conscience, which is a vestige of our earlier existence. William Wordsworth reflected this idea of an earlier existence in his poem, Ode to Intimations of Immortality. He wrote, "Our birth is but a sleep and a forgetting. The soul that rises with us, our life star, hath had elsewhere its setting, and cometh from afar, not in entire forgetfulness, and not in utter nakedness, but trailing clouds of glory do we come from God, who is our home." So this idea of a pre-existence is not new to our church, but it's something that we find great meaning in. Our embodiment here in this life is not a temporary degradation from our prior spiritual experience, but a step upward, since God are embodied, and the highest form of existence is unification of body and spirit. One of our scriptures reads, "Only spirit and element, inseparably connected, receive a fullness of joy." Adam and Eve are our archetypal parents. Eve's choice was an inspired one when she partook of the forbidden fruit. She recognized that she and Adam could not progress if there was no opposition. So she chose to partake of the fruit and experience life fully. So we reject the notion of original sin that so many other Christian faiths believe we inherited from Eve's decision. Indeed, we view Eve's decision as an ascent rather than a fall. One of the early female leaders in the church wrote this: "Our great maternal ancestor is entitled to reverent honor for braving the peril that brought her from the dark valley of ignorance and stagnation and placed them on a broad progressive path where they are, knowing good from evil, joy and sorrow, may progress. Mother Eve, for taking the initiative in this advanced movement, should receive encomiums of praise." So here we are on the earth, came from the pre-existent state, and we're here to exercise our agency, to learn in a different environment than our premortal life, especially to learn from our experiences, to face and work through challenges, disappointment, and pain, and success. From the Book of Mormon, the prophet Samuel admonishes, remember that whosoever perisheth unto himself, and whosoever doeth iniquity doeth it unto himself. For behold, ye are free. Ye are permitted to act for yourself, for God has made you free. He has given unto you that you might know good from evil, and he has given unto you that you might choose life or death. And you can do good and be restored to that which is good, or have that which is good restored unto you, or you can do evil and have that which is evil restored unto you. I think that I love that scripture just because it emphasizes that our choices in this life have real consequences. And there's no better way to learn than than experiencing those consequences. I think some things just can't be learned in a book. We just have to experience them to really fully get it. One purpose of life is to learn to follow God's commandments, which we view as helpful guidance from a loving parent, so that we can avoid self-inflicted pain. We strive to live in such a way that we will become comfortable in God's presence and will want to return to live with him and her in eternities. In this regard, Jesus is our exemplar. We strive to follow his teachings and example. Still, sin is inevitable. We invariably make decisions that alienate us from God and from each other. Bad choices can lead us to a downward spiral, alienating us further from God. Without intervention, we are lost. Jesus Christ mediates the collision of these two principles, God's loving mercy and human freedom. Jesus' atonement, in which he takes upon himself the pain and experience of human sin, enables the repentant individual to use his freedom for better ends. Repentance is really re-choosing. It is self-correcting and reorienting one's life to be in harmony with God's laws, the laws that undergird the universe. Life is a school where we learn from our experiences and learn to love. In fact, love is the heart of the two great commandments that Jesus taught in Matthew 22, beginning with verse 37. Jesus said unto him, "Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets." In other words, all of the commandments are based on the principle of love. It is because we love God and our fellow travelers that we are kind to others, that we feed the hungry, that we turn the other cheek, that we do good to those who oppose us. Heaven and afterlife is more than a reunion with God. The highest form of salvation involves participating in the divine nature, including divine indwelling. One of the early apostles and leaders of our church, Brigham H. Roberts, said, as a man expands, and I would add a woman, as a man or woman that expands toward divinity, more and more of the divine nature enters into his being until he obtains a fullness of light and truth. I love this concept of divine indwelling, that as we open up to and strive to follow God, that we can have more and more of him inside us. In sum, my faith teaches that the purpose of life is to have a full range of experiences, that if we accept them humbly and learn from them, that they can help us to progress and become more like God. God loves us and wants us to progress and return and live with him. He formed the earth and gave us the opportunity to be here with that object in mind. He has a plan to redeem all of mankind through love. So with this backdrop and within the context of the earlier comments I made, let me move on to my own personal perspective on what I think is the paramount purpose of life. This is my personal view, not necessarily how our church would think about it, although I think it's very consistent with how people in our church would think about it. In doing this, I will share some thoughts from the founder and first president of my church, Joseph Smith. So Christians have historically viewed heaven as a reward that we earn or that God dispenses. Joseph Smith introduced a new conception of heaven, one that is relationship-based. He taught that same sociality that exists among us here will exist among us there, only it will be coupled with eternal glory. Joseph Smith told one woman, "You shall have all your friends in heaven." Indeed, friendship was incredibly important to Joseph. Friendship is the grand fundamental principle of Mormonism, he said. And elsewhere he said, if I had no expectation of seeing my mother, my brother, and sisters and friends again, my heart would burst in a moment. Early apostle in the church, Parley P. Pratt, emphasized the durability of relationships with family and friends. He said, in heaven, one is restored to an association with his family, friends, and kindred, as part of the chain which connects the great royal family of heaven and earth in one eternal bond of kindred affection and association. Joseph Smith saw salvation as a communal enterprise. He envisioned a Zion society where all would live in righteousness, love, and peace, with no poor among them. In other words, he would create heaven right here on earth. He wasn't as concerned about where he ended up in the next life. Who he was with is what mattered. Once he quipped, "Let me be resurrected with my friends, whether to heaven or hell or any other good place. What do I care if the society is good?" Thus, Joseph taught, and we believe, that relationships are the very essence of heaven. Relationships are what constitute heaven. Without loving relationships, there is no heaven. In other words, we can't do heaven alone. And when we die, we don't instantly change. In the Book of Mormon, one of the prophets taught that same spirit that possesses your body at the time that you go out of this life, that same spirit will have power to possess your body in that eternal world. So if we want to live joyfully in eternity, our task is to learn to live joyfully with others in the here and now, to create heaven right here in our families, in our churches, in our neighborhoods and communities, to connect with people, to cultivate friendships, to practice love in all of our interactions. And there is something beautiful about relationships of love. The here and now literally becomes heaven when we are connected in such relationships. In one of our hymns, we sing, "Home can be a heaven on earth when we are filled with love." So too can our neighborhoods. So the implications are clear. Relationships matter, and they matter deeply, because we believe that relationships that we build in this life, all of them will persist in the eternities. Still, I'm not sure if I'm like you, but I have trouble putting relationship building, sometimes I have trouble putting relationship building above my egoic self. I periodically find myself defaulting to the attitude of, I'm right and you're wrong, especially in my family relationships. I need to constantly tamp down my ego and remind myself that I can be right or I can be happy. So it's my hope that we all can build relationships and build communities, that we can mirror the relationships that we imagine in heaven right here on earth. Still, relationship building is hard work. I think of Adam and Eve, the first couple in the Hebrew Bible. They had to learn to give and take and live with someone else. It requires, and to really be in a relationship, it requires imagination. The ability for us to imagine how life might appear to someone radically different than me. And I think that imagination is the beginning of empathy, which ultimately is necessary for relationship building. So let me just return back to Sarah's comment at the beginning. Let's see if I can say this right. Was it kintsugi, that gold glue that repairs ceramic, and then it creates something beautiful that was previously broken. It comes together in even a more beautiful way. I think that that's so true of relationships, that they get stronger, that even when we fall and even when we damage relationships, we can repair them. I was chatting with my 20-year-old daughter on our car ride here to Utah, where I'm at today. When I asked her about her views of the purpose of life, she shared a sentiment very similar to the one I've just presented. Her view was that the purpose of life is to learn how to connect with others. She shared how she feels a deep sense of fulfillment when she connects with someone that is very different than herself, and to figure out a way that she can commonly bond with them, and feel there's something in common that holds us together as humans. I thought that her thought was beautiful, and I find it to be true in my life as well. Similarly, I find that my deepest angst comes when relationships are damaged or broken. It's just heartbreaking to me. With that, let me just conclude with where I began, with Joseph Smith's beautiful thought on what heaven looks like. He said, that same sociality that exists among us here will exist among us there, only it will be coupled with eternal glory. My hope is that we can all prioritize relationship building, seeking to build communities of love. I'm now delighted just to have a dialogue with you. I'm certainly no expert in this relationship building or even in some of the things I shared, but I would love to hear your thoughts as well as to respond to any questions you might have.
There's
You should have
often,
permission to turn your to unmute yourself, and if you want to use the reaction button, you can raise your hand like this there, and that will let us know that we can call on you to ask a question or share a thought. Sarah?
yes, there's often a period of quiet after we have experienced so much that has been given to us by a speaker. I've got a whole page of notes, And that's with my left hand. So I would, Gloria Sunshine, you have your hand raised. Please go ahead.
Actually, I was testing the hand, but that's okay.
Oh.
I want to thank you, first of all, Dave. It was very, very inspiring. I realize I really know little or nothing about Mormonism or Latter-day Saint, your path.
Thank you.
Because first of all, I never heard or was misinformed that there is a real respect and equality for women. I had understood you were a very patriarchal church. But forgetting that, what I really want to comment on was I actually have never, ever heard in my 77 years that the purpose of life would be building relationships. I find that joyous. I feel that maybe there's hope for me because that's my favorite thing to do. And I am overjoyed with your presentation. So thank you very much.
Thank you for that. It's interesting that perception is new to me, that idea that this life is all about relationships. I think I come from a little bit more of like, oh, you should behave this way and you should develop these attributes. And if you develop enough attributes that are good, God will let you into heaven. But as I've just experienced more of life, this thought has really come to me, and I really love that idea, and I really believe it. But, so anyway, thank you for that.
Reza, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for everybody. Sarah, making this happen, and Reverend Will and David. One thing I just wanted to see if David could expand a bit upon is Joseph Smith teaching the same thing that is with us here will continue on in next life. Just wanted to know if you could expand a bit with your own personal intakes. This kind of resemble or coordinate with what I believe as well. Please, thank you.
Raza, thank you very much for a very thoughtful question. So I think in our Latter-day Saint theology, we think of life as a continuum because we believe we've existed always and we progressed in a life prior to this one and developed many attributes. Now this life is a life, it's kind of like maybe a young, like my daughter is just going away from home to go to school. You kind of go out on your own and you experience life in a different way when you leave father and mother and kind of do it on your own. And that's what we think this life is. And then we think the next life is it's just a continuum. We just continue whatever spirit, whatever attributes we develop in this life, we believe continue with us in the next. And I've always thought that that's pretty standard in our Latter-day Saint theology. But the idea that you couple that with relationships and that all of it persists is what I think is really beautiful to me. Is there anything else? Does that kind of hit the mark, or was there anything more you'd ask?
Yes, we have teachings from the mystics, Sufi mystics, that there are the ones that they are not here, but they are here. And there are the ones that they are here and they are not here. That kind of resemble to your teaching, Joseph Smith teachings, and the core elements that I have learned is when love comes in, and you expanded it into the lower relationship so beautifully. And the ones that have kind of in touch with the love of the universe, the beloved, they will be here all along. Let's say Prophet Jesus, Prophet Moses, peace be upon them. They are here. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Einstein is here, peace be upon him. that's kind of the perspective I have been learned. I wanted to kind of.
Yes, thank you. And we also believe that sort of the relationship between this life and the next life, and this life and the prior life, there's a little bit of permeability there. It's not like it's, just absolutely distinct realms. And to the extent we can develop more spiritually in tuned eyes, that we can have, we can feel the presence of those, or even have visions or those sorts of things, to be able to kind of know that those who have gone before us really are there on the other side, hoping, praying for us and hoping for our success, and perhaps influencing us in ways that we're not aware of. So that we kind of often refer to that as angels. There's angels among us that really are there for us. It's not just God who loves us and wants us to progress. It's all of these people that we've loved over the many years. We have a very strong sort of perspective on family. We have this view that families can be eternal. The idea is that these tight relationships will persist. And because we have such a focus on family, and it's not the only focus, we certainly want to focus on community as well, but it's a key and primary focus, because our belief is that when you have strong families, then you can develop strong communities. And we need to focus on that fundamental thing very first and foremost. But this idea that family members, that we can influence them on the other side, we can pray for them, we can actually do ordinances on their behalf that we think will help them to progress in the eternity, so that we're kind of in communion in that way with people who passed on. So, and I love that about our faith.
Yes, thank you.
So David, there's a question from the on the chat. From Joseph Easley. We use Richard Rohr's meditations daily and read some of his books. So I am really fascinated to hear you are in his living school now, which I think would be wonderful. How does participating in that fit with your faith tradition? What are you hoping to gain or give through being part of that?
That is a wonderful question. And my family members ask me the same thing. I have to say, it's funny. I guess what I'm hoping to gain is really kind of another lens to, we certainly have a lens in our faith on sort of how you commune with God and how you pray to God. Through the Richard Rohr Living School, I'm kind of looking at a relationship with God through another lens. And I find that there's a lot of beauty there that kind of moves me in a slightly different way than if I was just to stay within my faith. And so what I hope to do is to take what I'm learning in this school and take it back to my faith and put it in words and concepts that will resonate with people. It's not often, translating from one language to another language is fraught with challenges. And that's what the challenge that I'm hoping to be able to do. I think there's just so much beauty in this mystical approach that I'm learning and diving into. Hopefully that answers with a very thoughtful question.
Thank you. Two participants, who's had their, go ahead and speak if you have your hand up. I don't see all of you.
I do, Sarah, Robert Esch.
Oh, please. Hi, Robert.
Hi, thank you so much, David, for your presentation. I have to say, I have a couple of comments and a question. I have to say, I really admire the mission that you did and that other young people do when they head out into the world trying to spread knowledge of a loving God. I mean, that's a courageous thing to do. When those young missionaries come to our house, I always stop and pray with them for a safe and fruitful mission, and let God's will do what it does with that. Some of us here are Urantia Book students, and I always think of us as cousins with the LDS because so many things are similar, especially that there's both a father and mother who love us and know us, that we're sons and daughters of this divine God, and that light of God is within us. And I was very intrigued with the relationship idea. We have a quote, it's something like, the relationships are the architecture of reality. Civilization progresses as we allow love to prevail in these relationships. So again, I really am drawn to the idea that when we get to know somebody, there is an eternal meaning to that relationship. And as my wife Marilyn likes to say, eternity has already begun. So the relationships that we are having here are actually eternal relationships. My question for you, David, all that said, is you were referring to the atonement, and I was gathering the atonement doctrine. I was gathering that the LDS Church has a different take on that, and I was wondering if you could elaborate on that.
Thank you very much. By the way, thank you so much for being good to the missionaries who serve here locally. Yeah, I find them really thoughtful, well-meaning, and have love in their hearts. So thank you for sharing that love with them. We really appreciate that. Yeah, and in terms of, well, let me just comment on the quote that you read about relationships and community. I really do love that. It's a really beautiful quote. And I love what your wife says about we're already in eternity. I mean, I think when we think about life that way, we find such added meaning to it than we would if we didn't have that perspective. So that's beautiful. So in terms of atonement, we don't necessarily have a firm doctrine on exactly how the atonement works. We understand that it works. And whether you think of the penal substitution or the redemption theory, whatever, I mean, there's lots of different theories of atonement. But let me just share one scripture from our Book of Mormon that I find just absolutely beautiful. I can't quote it, but I'll see if I can just summarize what it says. It basically refers to that Jesus, the reason that he suffered what he did in Gethsemane and on the cross, the reason he suffered that was so that he could understand our pains and our sorrows. And that part of that was just wanting to be in a relationship with us required that he understand us better. And that allows us then to be in a relationship with him in ways that we couldn't have been otherwise. So to me, that really supports that relationship sort of theory of how important relationships are in life. So anyway, there you go. Is that helpful?
That's really beautiful. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
I have a question, if I may. This is Nazir Ahmed here.
Go ahead, Nazir.
The question relates to our relationship with nature. It was a very fascinating presentation. Really enjoyed it. And as a scientist, I always struggle with that question. What is the human relationship, the proper human relationship with nature? As we all know, there are those who hold that nature is secular and we can use it as we please. And there are other modes of thinking, other philosophies that see the grace of God in nature and see God in nature. And there are philosophies that see nature as a sign pointing towards God. So in terms of relationships, how do you see the appropriate relationship, human relationship with nature, to nature, and how are we to use it, not use it, or use it as a means to make our progress towards God?
Wonderful question. So let me just jump right in with one of our scriptures again, which is that this is in some of Joseph Smith's teachings. And again, not going to be able to quote it, but it goes like this, that God created food, created the earth, which would produce food, and the animals and the beauty of plant life around us, so that basically for the delight of man. But we are to use all of these resources cautiously, carefully, and being a good steward. So that is this stewardship concept is clear from the very beginning that's what God expects us to be here in life. In terms of the idea that plants or animals are living beings, that they have spirit, or that they're not just things, that there's something beyond that in them. Our theology teaches that. I think Joseph Smith said that he expected to see his favorite dog in the next life, or something like that. So there's this idea that these all of the what we interact with, the plants and the animals, there's something divine in each of those as well. So we really do have an obligation generally to care for the earth. I guess the next obvious question is, so what kind of advocacy does our church do related to stewardship? And the answer is not very much at this point. I'm hoping that we will do more, quite frankly. But the reason for that is the church tends to focus very acutely on personal righteousness, family solidarity, serving in the community, but does not want to dictate exactly what form that service takes. So they encourage us to be involved and make a difference in our communities. And many Latter-day Saints are very active in the environmental stewardship kind of responsibilities, just not the church in general, not taking a lead role in that regard. Do you have any follow-up question to that?
Well, it was a very interesting answer. When we look at the planet Earth as a single home,
yeah,
and we look at all of us, humankind, as a single family, that idea of stewardship takes on a transcendental character. And when we look at what's happening around the world, I'm talking about the environment now. What's happening around the world, the global warming, and so many people in the know concerned about what may happen in the future, that question takes on even greater importance. So as men of faith and women of faith, we need to ask that question and come up with answers that are satisfactory, first of all, within our own paradigms and also within the paradigms of others. That's where I was coming from.
David, I'm wondering if you could maybe answer his question slightly different and share a little bit more about the disaster relief that the LDS Church does, and how your history of persecution and living on the edge of the frontier influenced that disaster recovery culture.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, we are very, very active in disaster preparedness, as well as sort of jumping in as an organization when there are disasters to provide helping, service, as well as goods and medical support and those kind of things. But to thank you, Reverend Will, for the prompt. I think early on, as I mentioned, that the Latter-day Saints were expelled from Illinois in like 1847, 1848, they all left Illinois, and there were thousands of them, over 10,000 Latter-day Saints at the time in Illinois, that they trekked across the plains to the Utah Valley, settled in near Salt Lake, and then expanded from there in the West. And quite at the time, Utah was not even a territory of the state. It was outside of the United States, and that was one of the objectives for the.
It was Mexico.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, thank you. They wanted to escape the United States because they felt they'd been persecuted. They'd been persecuted in New York. They'd been persecuted in Ohio. They'd been persecuted in Missouri, and then in Illinois. So they just had this, maybe you might call it a persecution complex. And I think that's a very appropriate way to think about that they just wanted to get out of the United States and build their own sort of effectively country. And Brigham Young as the second president of the church was both the ecclesiastical leader as well as the political leader in Utah in those early days. Anyway, what happened is that they just basically couldn't stay disconnected with the world. And over time, they had to integrate. For 50 years, the Latter-day Saints were pretty well lived on their own and did their own thing without much intrusion from the outside world, other than there was a period of time when once that Utah became a territory, that the U.S. Army came over to try to enforce something that Brigham Young didn't want to do. So anyway, that was a little history of our church. But the idea that we were refugees, we were effectively felt like we were kicked out of the United States and we had to make it on our own. And by the way, it was nip and tuck in the early days. They were close to starvation over several summers when the crop failure and that kind of thing happened. So it was, we recognize what it's like to be a refugee or to be in a position where you just can't feed yourself. And I think that's again, a great focus of our church going forward from them.
So we have a
And
couple.
David, I'll just mention that my wife is a great granddaughter of Parley P. Pratt that you mentioned, and he started Park City. And I'm a son of the Utah Pioneers, but my ancestors converted later in Wales and came across in one of the last hand carts.
Wow.
So everything was already established in Salt Lake, and when my ancestors, after their conversion and coming up the Mississippi River and coming to the U.S., they came over in one of the last hand carts to make it to Salt Lake. Yeah. And when they got there, Brigham Young sent them to Fillmore to be farmers, and that's where they many of my cousins still live in Fillmore in central Utah.
Wow, great heritage.
So there is there's not like an organized, I guess there are some Mormons or Latter-day Saints that are involved in the environmental movement, and there is a theology of care for the earth, but it's not as organized as, say, environmental movements or even our Interfaith Climate Action Network. We don't have any LDS folks that are. There is a concern and a care for using the earth in ways that are honorable to God.
That's right. And then again, there are a number of Latter-day Saints that are very active in this space. And I'm aware of at least one non-for-profit that was started by Latter-day Saints. It's called Latter-day Stewardship or Latter-day, I think that's called something, Latter-day Environment or something like that. That they're trying to recruit people at various places throughout the United States and just to get involved in environmental service projects.
And Terry Tempest Williams is a famous Latter-day Saint author that has done a lot on the health of the Great Salt Lake, which is actually failing right now because of the drought.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Yeah, there's a couple of questions in the chat box, David. One is from Ruth Ahern. How does the idea of eternal relationships compare with the belief of many religions in the oneness of humanity?
I would say I think it's very consistent. I think the idea of the oneness of humanity, basically, I think that means that we're all connected to each other. You know, we're one in the sense, I think Jesus taught the principle of if you are not one, ye are not mine. And this idea that we need to be brothers and sisters, and we need to be one in that sense. I think Jesus also taught, I am the vine and ye are the branches. You know, as we connect into Jesus and into those principles that he taught, you know, it somehow helps us to thrive in ways that we couldn't. And as we thrive that way, we can establish more oneness with those around us. It was clearly Jesus's focus. You know, relationships really mattered. I love his parable of the prodigal son, that, you know, the son who leaves home, takes the father's inheritance. And that was a no-no to take inheritance early in Jewish law, leaves home, spends all that money in riotous living. And he's at a very, very low point, and he realizes he could be better as a servant in his father's house. As he comes home, but his father rushes out and gives him a loving embrace and prepares a big celebration for him. And I think that's sort of how God is with us, that God is just there ready to thrust his arms around us and love us. Unfortunately, the older brother was frustrated because he had stayed home and done all the right things, and he was mad that his brother was getting all this recognition. But the story ends with the father saying, "Why are you mad? That, you know, everything I have is yours too. Don't feel like this is a competition. We all love each other." And I just think that whole idea of reconciliation and relationship, and, you know, it's a beautiful thing that Jesus taught that brings us together as one.
And often the ones that are the most difficult to include in this relationship are the ones that seem to cause the most problems and are the hardest to bring in to the circle, because they almost purposefully do things that leave them out. And this is where I think that the great problems come from, is how to include. I mean, it's easy to preach to the choir, how to include those who are troubled or make bad decisions or are not part, they're not part of the circle, how to reach out to them without judgment so that they feel they can come into the circle and belong, because we know they all want to belong. Even the gangs, you know, they join gangs because they want to belong. So what can we do to build these kind of relationships with those who are on the outside?
Yeah, that is the question, and I don't think there is certainly one answer to that. It's complicated, and I think that's why we have to connect into Jesus. That's why we have to really listen and feel inside, what is the way to connect with this individual in this circumstance. And yeah, we do need to continue moving forward, and sometimes people can get in the way, and so I think we have to include them in the right ways that will be beneficial for them and be beneficial for whatever we're trying to accomplish. And it really does require a lot of thoughtfulness. And you know, sometimes we get annoyed and frustrated when we've got people like that around us, as opposed to saying, okay, this is my opportunity to really dive deep and really think and listen to what God has to tell me on how best to work with this particular individual that's in front of me right now. Again, I love Jesus because he always responded to the person in need in front of him. You know, he never turned away, notwithstanding that the disciples said, well, you got this to do and you got that to do. He was always right there caring for the person who had a need in a way that just felt so ennobling. And that's our task. Our task is to be like Jesus in that way. And it's no one, I'm not going to tell you it's easy, but it is the task of life to learn how to be better at that. And I've got a long ways to go, but I'm certainly working at it.
Thank you, David. I really bring that into my very soul, is to be as Jesus was, and be present, really present with this, you know, with all of us, of course, but especially with those who are really troubled, and to listen deeply, to listen compassionately. And that's difficult, as you say, but, you know, I believe that there's more joy when there is one who has been on the outside of everything. When that one is brought into the circle, there's probably more joy in heaven than for all of the rest of them that are already, quote, in heaven.
That really resonates with me, certainly consistent with how I felt. It's feel that when people are in great pain and they can feel like they're heard and included and loved, their heart just overflows, and and so does ours when we're including them. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's powerful work.
Yeah.
We have another comment in the chat from Bridget Kilpatrick. I recall a hymn I learned in childhood, which goes, "We are one in the Spirit, we are one in the Lord, and we pray that our unity may one day be restored." Anyone else recall this one? Its origin? I've heard it before.
That's the first I've heard of it, but I love it. It's great.
Yeah, I can almost hear the music of that hymn.
Can you sing it for us, Sarah?
I can't. No, maybe Bridget, can you sing it for us?
We are one in the Spirit, we are one in the Lord, we are one in the Spirit, we
Yes.
are one in the Lord, and we pray that all unity may one day be restored. And they'll know we are Christians by our love, by our love. Yes, they'll know we are Christians by our love. Which is based on John 17, which also inspired the United Church of Christ to unite 4 different denominations into one.
Awesome. Love that.
This is Joe Easley. I always associated that as coming out of the Catholic tradition. I'm not sure that's right, but that's where I first heard that hymn.
Well,
It's used in
maybe,
the Protestant traditions as well.
yeah.
So I think that it was composed sometime around the 1950s. And I believe it's from a Christian composer and put to music at that time. So that's my remembrance of the story of that particular song.
Yes. And it really fits into our purpose of life is becoming one in the spirit, one with each other. It's really a beautiful song.
Here's the history of the song. A parish priest at St. Brendan's on the south side of Chicago in the 1960s was very involved in the local civil rights movement and needed something for his youth choir to sing at ecumenical interracial events. Finding nothing, he wrote this song in a single day by Peter Schultz, 1966.
Thank you, Will. Bob Howell, you have your hand up.
Oh, David, I really, I'm going back a little bit.
Bob, you have to, can you speak louder?
Okay, let me pull this in. How is that now?
More, louder?
Okay, let me try this. How is that?
That's better.
I'm sorry, maybe my speaker isn't working.
We can hear you.
Okay, here we go. I really appreciated your presentation. Thank you. Just a comment on the word righteousness. It's the most frequently found word in the Bible. And one of the learnings in seminary that I thought was most important was a definition by a Roman Catholic theologian of the word righteousness. And it goes back to your relationship idea, David. To live in rightly ordered ways with all people, and with God, and with the environment. And so that sort of covers the relationship area and what our purpose in life is to live in rightly ordered ways in those 3 areas.
That is beautiful. Thank you, Bob. You remind me of at least one scripture in the Hebrew Bible. In Isaiah chapter 1, the Israelites were doing lots of burnt offerings, and the Lord was kind of frustrated with them because they're doing all the rituals, but they're not caring for the poor. They're not being kind. They're not in relationship with each other in the right way. And basically he says, all your burnt offerings are nothing to me. What matters is this. Yes, so I completely agree. I think I read somewhere else this similar idea that the word righteous sort of came from this idea of caring for the poor and the needy, that was what constituted righteousness, of being in relationship with people who need us. We have a wonderful scripture in the Book of Mormon that says, when you are in the service of your fellow men, you are in the service of your God. And I really like that it's just when we're caring for each other. And I don't, I'm like you, I'm probably sensitive to the idea of, the white knight kind of thing where you're going to come in and save the day. And we have to be really careful when we're serving, not to bring glory to us, but to really do it because of deep love, because we love God and we want to be in relationship with people, not because we're there to tell them what to do or whatever. We're just there because we love. And I think that's very consistent with that concept of righteousness.
Thank you. Now I have a question.
Sure.
Dottie just left the house, and so she asked the question, David, when we see Mormon missionaries come around and knock on the door, we don't see women. We don't see young ladies, women coming to the door. We see young men.
Yes.
Has that been a policy of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to really put the men out there, the young men, and is that policy changing?
Thank you. Great question. And I would say historically, if we go back 150 years, all the missionaries were men. And then beginning 50 or so years ago, we started calling women missionaries as well, young women missionaries. They were small in number generally until recently, where because it used to be it's the responsibility of the young men to go, and the young women can go if they want to. But now there's a much stronger encouragement for young women to go, and so the numbers are actually there's probably almost a third and maybe close to a half of the missionaries serving now are young women. It just so happens that, missionaries, sometimes some areas lend themselves more to male missionaries than female. You may live in a scary neighborhood and they send women only in areas that they feel like they'll be ultra safe. And they'll send male missionaries in places that maybe are less. I'm just teasing you. You probably live in a very safe neighborhood, but I don't know what that is, but hopefully you will see female missionaries around in your area before too long.
I hope so.
Yes.
Thank you, Dave.
You're welcome.
So I encourage any of you.
Sarah? Hello?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes. Go ahead, Jenny.
Hi.
I'm sorry. Please.
Oh, gosh. Thank you so much, David. I was just really wondering what the presentation was going to be like, and I can't tell you how inspiring it has been. It's left my heart with the emphasis on my interpersonal relationships and also the relationships that the whole world is having. There was a Catholic priest in Switzerland named Hans Kung who said, there will not be peace in the world until the religions respect each other and live together in relationship. And when you really think about where we are with our interfaith movement, it's been a century since interfaith began in the late 19th century. There has been so much that's been going on around the emphasis of dialogue and the emphasis of really getting together. And Sarah and Sunshine and Ruth and I have really felt that the purpose of this program was to bring an educational interfaith program to Rossmore. And so it's been very, very popular because I think the more that we hear about other faiths and the points of view and presented by different speakers, each time we have different speakers for religions. Sometimes we have the same, but many times we have different speakers. I think that goes a long way towards really helping to understand. And I liked what you said about listening, because we really have to get ourselves better at being able to really open up to what people are saying, to be able to understand what it is that what they believe in. So I think the more that we can learn, and the more that we can be in relationship, just like the iCare program, which is a program sponsored by Interfaith Council of Contra Costa County, which basically asks different congregations in the I4C community to get together and join together on a service project. So I know that your church does that, but you also have participated in the iCare program, which means joining with other congregations. So I really think that, we've been in this program for, 5 years now? This is our 5th year. And we have more and more people. People are still coming because they're still really fascinated and interested in what's being said. So thank you so much, because I'm leaving with this very strong knowing about relationship in the world. And that's a very positive thing for me, no matter what faith it's coming from. So thank you so much. Really good
Well,
presentation.
thank you so much, Channing. Really appreciate that. And but by the way, your comment about empathy, you know, it's hard to do. You know, that it requires, as I mentioned, imagination, and I think it requires curiosity as well. That there's something about being really interested in the other, and that starts with just being centered ourselves and not being fearful of what the other has to offer. To just set aside our fears, because I think so many times fear of the unknown, or fear of, I don't know, fear that they're going to take away something that you have by arguing with you, or whatever. You know, if we set aside our fear and just learn and to listen and really try to empathize, really be curious, it's just amazing what can happen. By the way, related to interfaith, I'm just really pleased that our faith, we have not been that involved in interfaith historically, but beginning 20 or so years ago, and Reverend Will was sharing with me some of that history recently, but that our faith has become more and more involved, and I'm so thrilled that we are. It's just a beautiful thing. I'm thrilled personally as well, because I just love being involved in it, and it's really a joy. So thank you so much. Well, David, we love you. You're a wonderful representative from the Mormon Church, and we have wonderful members on the Interfaith Council. And I think that Rossmoor's Interfaith Council is working much more closely with the Interfaith Council of Contra Costa County now. So we're getting really good exchange. But thank you so much. And the one other word I'd like to add here is something that I live by, and that is the word mutuality. When you're thinking of another person, oftentimes, if you really think to yourself, you know, oftentimes you'll have these feelings of I'm better than, or I'm not as good as, or this person has more than I have and I don't have as much as they do, or I have more than somebody else has. And really, mutuality is wiping the slate clean and looking at each person as equal. And I had the definition of mutuality. Let me see if I can find it. The sharing of a feeling, an action, or a relationship between two or more parties. A high degree of mutuality of respect for each other's expertise or experience. And I think that the word experience is important, is a high degree of respect for the other's experience. So if two faiths come together that have not had much to do with each other, the most important thing in the beginning is just to really be open to the experience and the practices of the other faith, and not to form judgments. And then to spend enough time in the company of people who believe differently from yourself, and just open your heart. Just open your heart.
Thank you, Channing.
That's the discipline, is just opening your heart. So thank you for helping us to open our hearts to each other today.
Thank you.
Mary Smith, are you, I mean, you're not Mary Smith, but the person who's on Mary Smith, do you want to speak? I see your hand. I don't know what that means. No, I think he said no, right? So what I would encourage is to speak from your own personal experience, to speak even from your own personal spiritual or religion, because that helps all of the rest of us. Like if one is a Buddhist, or if one is a Urantian, or if one is a Ananda, speak from that place and share with us your golden thread having to do with the purpose of life. Please feel free to do that.
You know, just one other comment, David, and that is, you know, in missionaries and in the church going out to work with people around the world, I think there's a heavy emphasis in proselytizing. There's a heavy emphasis in really teaching the Mormon faith and converting people to the Mormon faith. And what I really liked about your talk today, there was none of that. It was completely open. It was so easy to listen to, no matter what background people are coming from here. We're hearing the very positive parts of the Mormon faith in terms of relationship building and families and communities and love and service. So I think, you know, for me, this is my own personal belief, is if we can share our experiences with each other and not proselytize, you know, not try to convert, then we will really make such what's the right word? We will advance as a civilization.
I couldn't agree more, Channing. And there is, just in terms of like the proselytizing element of our faith, we do believe that in Jesus' injunction that he left the apostles, you know, after his resurrection, which is go ye to all the world and preach the gospel. That's sort of the injunction of go out and proselytize. That said, there has been a greater and will continue to be a greater emphasis on our young missionaries performing service in the community and just not proselytizing, just being there and doing good in the community. So I don't think that proselytizing is going to go away, but I think it's going to be coupled with more community service, which we recognize is really what we need to do as Christians. You know, we really need to be there in the community caring for people. So I appreciate your comment. That's thoughtful and insightful.
Thank you. So we have a few more minutes. And it's okay to have a little bit of quiet for people to think about what they'd like to say or share. I do have a question, seeing as nobody's coming forth right now, for David. You said that that we lived before we came to this planet. So do you use the word reincarnation?
We don't use that word, although there is some similarities between, the continuity of life, I guess I would say. The one interesting concept about this premortal life, the fact that we've lived forever, basically puts us in some ways of the same species as God. We don't view the separation between us and God quite so starkly as I think some other faiths do, that we believe that God is basically like us, only he's just advanced a whole lot farther than we have, and that we have the ability to become like God, specifically like him. So that idea of the premortal life gives us this continuity of spirituality that we're gonna carry forward. So yes, it's not, I guess, reincarnation has this view that you get you're born into different life forms, right, over the course of many kind of life forms on the earth. Our experience on Earth, it's a once and done. So it's not like we come back to this earth again. We come from the premortal life, we live this earth life, and then we move to the afterlife and continue on our existence there.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else have their hand up that I'm missing or I don't see? Sunshine? Oh, Robert Esch, you're sharing something. Robert Esch is saying, humankind has not woven the web of life. Whoops, I lost it. Okay, let me go back to the chat room. Humankind has not woven the web of life. We are but one thread in it. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. All things are bound together. All things connect. And that's said by Chief Seattle. And he's addressing you, David. I think Chief Seattle would be comfortable with your beliefs. Thank you, Robert.
I agree. Yeah.
Well, David, I would like to just ask, you were saying you're part of Richard Rohr's Living School as well as your Mormon faith. What part in your presentation is, how would you say, added or enhanced with what you have been learning with or expanded, let's put it expanded, with Richard Rohr, because again, I am so taken by the continuity. You may not use the word reincarnation, but it is still the infinite immortal life of the spirit, which I think we all agree, no matter what our path is. I know Ananda certainly agrees with that. We may say there's an astral plane and a causal plane, and we may take different planes, but I'd like to know, back to the question, what influence does your living school have on the Mormon aspect?
Well, I would say I'll answer that in two ways. And it has influenced me. I think the first way is that it's influenced me to pray in a different way. So I'm not sure it's changed my theology, Eddie, but it really has changed how I think about God in a way I think that's very productive. So the way I've prayed historically is I'll thank God for things that are blessings in my life. And then I'll sort of ask him for things or share my challenges, my troubles, what's on my mind, those kinds of things, which there's nothing wrong with that approach to praying, but it feels a bit transactional, I guess I would say, I need this from you kind of thing. So the way that I've learned, even in advance of going to living school, is, from reading Richard Rohr's books, as well as at the living school, is this idea of prayer being an emptying of ourselves, to really let everything go, let my ego go, and just empty myself out, and then let God fill it. So so when I'm in meditation or prayers, it's like a prayer every day. Try to spend 20 minutes doing this, where I just try to empty myself, and as thoughts come to my mind, I just try to acknowledge them and then dismiss them and come back to this idea that I want to commune with God. That's my objective. And I've just found that practice to be very powerful. I really, really appreciate it. And I do feel like in that way, I connect with God in a different way than I ever did doing my, quote, transactional prayers. It's a beautiful thing.
I do actually come from the Catholic background, which is Richard Rohr's background.
Yes.
But I went to the Ananda path, which does teach meditation. And I too came to the same thing as you, where I felt with prayer from a little girl as a good Catholic, prayed in a transactional, I think that's a good way to say it. And that having learned meditation, which seems to envelop now almost all the traditions, is seeing that just being and puts us into a new trust. I was at a Christian meditation this morning, and that was talking about how to love ourselves in the emptying of ourselves and allowing God, trusting God, the old letting go, let God, anyway. I think maybe you, after hearing you, you have given me a lot of hope in our present day world. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, let me continue to answer the question, if that's okay. By the way, if you're interested in reading, I would highly recommend the book Centering Prayer by Cynthia Bourgeault. Wonderful, wonderful book. And it kind of comes at meditation from a Christian perspective in this concept of emptying yourself. So that's wonderful. And then the second way that the Living School has influenced me was that with this concept of God dwells in each of us. Our theology is we're all sons and daughters of God, and there's a divine nature in all of us, but I really hadn't thought of it quite as literally, is that, there is a piece of God inside me, and this divine indwelling that connecting to my deepest part, but the deepest part of me is really connecting to God. And to me, that's a beautiful and powerful concept that really has, I think, helped my spirituality.
Thank you. I too have a meditation practice and come from the centering prayer way of being with God. I make an appointment every morning, and I set my little insight timer for 20 minutes. And okay, God, here I am. I wish to be with you. And I take deep breaths and I settle myself down. And by golly, no sooner do I do that than I start planning for dinner or whatever. And then what works though is I come back to God. I come back to God no matter where I go in my monkey mind. I have this time with you, God, and I'm going to be here with you. And, you know, sometimes I don't have to work on it so much, but sometimes I have to continue to come back to God, knowing he's always there. She is always there. So meditation, I believe, is one of those golden threads that the Big Questions Committee is always looking for. The golden threads that go through, you know, the higher truths of all of the religions. And being with God, meditating, whatever you want to call it, is certainly one of those.
Thank you. That's beautiful. You said that so well. Yeah. Sounds like you've read Cynthia Bourgeau's book too, haven't you? Yeah, that's awesome.
So, David, you shared a Krister Stendahl quote at the beginning of your speech, and you know he's a Lutheran bishop, right?
Yes.
Do you know the context in which he said those three things?
No, I actually don't. So please.
Okay. So he said those three things when he was the bishop in the Boston area, and I think it was leading up to, is Boston or DC? He's a German Lutheran bishop. He's actually come out against some of the origins of Lutheran theology, and has actually taken issue with Martin Luther's invention of a new definition of grace from Romans 3. And so he's well thought of and well written in the broader ecumenical community, but we know him mostly from Europe as a bishop. But his time here in DC, he was the bishop of, I think it was DC, when the LDS Church was building their big temple there. And the criticism that people were using to try to criticize the church and keep the church from building their temple, maybe it was Boston, and it was in New England rather than DC, but he said those things in the lead up and based on the criticism of other Christians against the Latter-day Saint Church, knowing that they wanted to build this temple. So if you have that written, can you just say those 3 points again? Because he lifts that up, and I think Barbara Brown Taylor lifts that up in her book, Holy Envy, as well, that's the source of where these statements came from.
Yeah, I'll read the quote verbatim then. He says, "I would apply the same principles for good leadership that I often find for effective interfaith dialogue. Let the other define herself. Don't think you know the other without listening. Compare equal to equal, not my positive qualities to the negative ones of the other, and find beauty in the other so as to develop holy envy."
So if you haven't read this book called Holy Envy by Barbara Brown Taylor, she's an Episcopal priest who wrote the book Holy Envy. She left the pulpit. She got too popular as an Episcopal preacher, and people. She was like serving a small little congregation in a rural area, and because she has written so much and became popular, and people named her to like the top 100 preachers in the country, people started crashing her services at their small Episcopal church. Wow. And she left the ministry when she felt like it was more about her preaching moment than the ritual. And she wrote a whole book on leaving church and how she couldn't take it anymore and all of the pressure and all of that. But her next book was based on her teaching comparative religion at a small liberal arts college in rural Georgia, and how she takes members of her class of various faith traditions to go visit mosques and go visit Buddhist temples and go visit Sikh temples and synagogues in these other places in order to get to know them. And I'm sure she used that quote from Bishop Stendahl to help provide the basis and good reminders for what it is that we do during interfaith moments. It's to get to know the other, and it's not a competition.
Thank you, Will.
Yes, thank you. That I didn't know that background, so that's super helpful. And it sounds like you would recommend the book Holy Envy.
I've read it in my church when we do our Interfaith Sundays, like we did a couple weeks ago, where we had 2 Sikhs come and share with us about their faith. We call them Holy Envy Sundays, and we do them at least quarterly. Encourage your faith leaders to bring in other faith leaders and have conversations with them in front of your congregation so that you can get to know people of different faith traditions firsthand, rather than through the anti-Mormon or anti-Christian or anti-Muslim literatures.
What a good idea. What a good experience. Well, David, I would like to thank you and thank all of you who have joined us and have participated. It was just opening, a heart-opening presentation. I appreciate so much the feeling of where you are coming from, where the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is coming from. And it seems like they are a church that is willing to change also, which is always encouraging in a creative way. And I'm coming away with the purpose of life is to build relationships. To me, that is just soul work. The purpose of life is to build relationships. So I, on the behalf of the Big Questions Committee, Channing Miller, Ruth Ahern, and Gloria Sunshine, thank you, and Will McGarvey, and thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a delight to be with you today.
So goodbye, y'all.
Bye-bye.
See you next time. We will have Rabbi Jerry Danzig on next time. Rabbi talking about the purpose of life.
Thanks, David. It was wonderful.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you
Be well.
very much.
And Will, you'll send me the recording, Will, like you always do.